concludes all operations of the emergency alert system. All stations may now resume regular programming.
For expanding its sphere of influence on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy.
Okay, so if you were wondering why there wasn't a video last week, well, I was laid up with a flu that came directly from hell. Well, at the very least, I believe it came from hell itself. Anyway, let's get back into the swing of things by going over some pressing stories. And then for the next topic, a video that I was hoping to do last week, we're going to dive into Malthusian theory. Anyway, let's start off by talking about a few new Klaus Schwab puppets rising to power. Now, I don't believe I know enough about Brazilian politics to really go too deep into this, but we do have to talk about some of the surface issues going on. And I quote, "The top electoral authority in Brazil announced on Sunday evening that 77-year-old hardline socialist Lula da Silva, once convicted and sentenced to over 2 decades in prison for alleged corruption and money laundering, well, they announced that he won the presidential election against Bolsonaro. In his first words as president-elect, he vowed to reconstruct the very soul of this nation, which is a line widely used by Democrats in the US. But really, it's all about moving away from the small government, pro-freedom ideals of the Bolsonaro administration." So, as it turns out, Bolsonaro lost with 49.47% of the vote. Lula won with 50.53% of the vote. However, over 5 million votes were nullified. Now, a lot of people believe that that is suspicious. Now, is it a coincidence that Lula is a major proponent of the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab? Is it a coincidence that Lula is the candidate that buys into the ESG, environmental fascism, the stakeholder capitalist model? He even buys into the digital ID schemes. Yes, he is all in on the World Economic Forum vision, and as stated, just so happens, he was in prison for corruption and money laundering. Yes, they say trading the prison cell for the presidency. Now, with previous charges for corruption, well shit, they have themselves a leader that's willing to pimp himself out for a bribe. So yeah, they got their guy. However, we should probably note what he was actually charged with, and I quote, "Lula's victory is particularly momentous given that during the 2018 election, which Bolsonaro won, Lula was in prison after being found guilty of buying a luxury beachfront property with bribe money. The case was part of a much larger corruption investigation that came to be known as, and I quote, Operation Car Wash, which unveiled a nationwide corruption scheme involving dozens of high-ranking politicians that operated during Lula's presidential tenure. The government enriched itself by offering overpriced contracts for infrastructure and other public works projects to private contractors, and those private contractors would then use some of those excess money to bribe the politicians, securing future contracts." End of quote. Now, it sounds a lot like, corruption we see in the US. You know, Cuomo was doing this, and also Kathy Hochul. Okay, so the response from the United States is rather interesting. I was checking out some comments in my flu symptom stupor, and yeah, naturally, it's the same lines used for everyone that's going against the agenda. Bolsonaro is being labeled a fascist. They are claiming that Brazil averted a dictator, a fascist dictator, by electing a dude who was previously arrested for corruption. Okay, sure. This is going to be an interesting experiment. How long will it take until Brazil falls like Venezuela? Insane monetary policies, following the World Economic Forum vision, crazy environmental standards, and well, they could end up in hyperinflation. Let's see how the crazy ESG, World Economic Forum agenda plays out for Brazil. For their sake, let's hope they don't end up like Sri Lanka, which is a distinct possibility. Anyway, then from there, we have people like Al Gore celebrating Lula's win. Of course, the tyrants who are trying to manipulate the world into a surveillance state, a carbon credit system, based upon pseudo-scientific environmental standards, which in reality just transfers power away from average people into the hands of petty crooks. But the real head-scratcher here is the fact that Brazil, and Lula in particular, are massive proponents of the BRIC financial system. I believe he was a founding member of the group. It consists of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So really, we have US leaders openly advocating for a regime in Brazil, one that is communist, or socialist, and one that is advocating for a new financial system to replace the dominance of the dollar. Now, isn't that entirely counterintuitive to our national interest? Unless the plan is to destroy the financial system and somehow wrestle the BRIC financial system into the global framework for a CBDC system, which would of course be policed by global financial entities. I just don't see how this helps, how this works. I don't see how this ties into their overall plan. None of it really makes that much sense. There needs to be some catalyst that gets all of these systems to merge into one. You know, the global establishment, the G20 nations especially, want a singular system, a global system. And Russia, China, the BRIC system are still pursuing a multipolar world. Everything is going to clash at some point. So, okay, be sure to fill me in on some details regarding this because, as I said, I don't know enough about the election or what the true sentiment is of the Brazilian people. So, let me know what you think. Alright, but we have to move on to the UK. Yes, that is right, Klaus Schwab has another one. So, a little recap. Boris Johnson resigned and Liz Truss took over. For a month, basically, and then something happened. Now, we have to get off track for a moment. Check this out. Yes, we have to talk about the Nord Stream pipeline for a moment. Russia claims that they have proof that the UK hit the pipeline for the US. Now, of course, the obvious question is, how does Russia know this? Well, as it turns out, Liz Truss used her iPhone to send a message to Secretary Blinken, saying, and I quote, "It's done," a minute after the pipeline blew up and before anybody else knew. Her personal iPhone. Yes, she used her personal iPhone. Now, could her resigning have nothing to do with the stated reason, but because British intelligence received word that the Russians hacked her phone? Now, could that be part of the reason as to why she left so abruptly? I mean, they couldn't just come out and say, oh, hey, our new leader is entirely compromised by Russian intelligence. They have her personal phone, her data, and all the info that comes with it. According to reports, they also have detailed text about weapon shipments. That's a massive fuck up. Anyway, let's get back to the main aspect of the story. So, if you remember, the UK had a few choices. Boris Johnson was a World Economic Forum stooge, and Liz Truss was as well. However, originally, they also had one other choice, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, but Rishi Sunak, who is also a World Economic Forum stooge. Whoever they choose, it doesn't matter. The World Economic Forum has their string attached to all of them. Anyway, so now they're on to their third World Economic Forum stooge. And that's just for now. Apparently, some are already drafting letters of no confidence. So, we'll see how this goes. Regardless, you may remember, well damn, probably not. I think we talked about this last year. But this individual here, Mr. Sunak, the new UK Prime Minister, is all about CBDCs and furthering the subjugation of the British people. He says, and I quote, "The G7 is launching a set of policy principles for retail, central bank digital currencies, which are CBDCs. So the other member nations that are going along with it include the United States, France, Italy, Germany, Canada, and Japan. And I quote again, the decision on whether to launch a central bank digital currency is for each country to make, and no G7 jurisdiction has yet made that choice. These decisions raise important questions about the reshaping of our economy. We're excited to be taking a leading role with G7 members in publishing this exploratory work, bringing money and finance into the 21st century." Now to finish up, I'm just going to read a section from an article in the EU Times. And I quote, "In case you haven't been paying attention, the UK is onto its third Prime Minister in the last 7 weeks. First, Boris Johnson was forced out. Then Liz Truss served as PM for 45 days until she too was removed. It was the shortest term for a British PM in history. And then guess who took over to quote-unquote right the ship? That's right, it was World Economic Forum member Jeremy Hunt. What a coincidence. And then 3 people entered the fray to become the UK's next Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, and Penny Mordaunt. Would you be shocked if I told you that all 3 are also World Economic Forum members? I don't think you would be. So, who were the World Economic Forum member MPs who backed Sunak before Johnson and Mordaunt conceded? Well, we had Dominic Raab, the MP for Esher and Walton. We had Robert Jenrick, the MP for Newark. Liam Fox, the MP for North Somerset. We had David Davies. We had the MP for Bromsgrove, Matt Hancock, the MP for West Suffolk. They had the MP for Tonbridge and Malling. Then we had Jeremy Hunt, the MP for South West Surrey. Tobias Elwood, Parliamentary Undersecretary of State as well. They are all World Economic Forum members. They are entirely controlled, and each of them is going to continue down the road of the Great Reset. So what has happened in the UK in the last couple of months? In short, the World Economic Forum has pulled off a coup, deposing 2 sitting prime ministers, overriding British democracy, devastating the economy, and finally installing their own man, Rishi Sunak. The World Economic Forum member, billionaire, and owner of a shadowy company with a pyramid-shaped office that happens to be working hand-in-hand with the World Economic Forum to implement key planks to the globalist agenda. The whole leadership contest to be Prime Minister was simply a charade to give the British public the illusion of democracy and choice. The fact is that the World Economic Forum had their man lined up a long time ago. Okay, so for the next segment, let's get into a big event that took place pretty recently, Davos in the Desert. Davos in the Desert is an event that is being touted by journalists as an event that rivals the World Economic Forum. And now, I don't think they're rivals. They have the same agenda. Anyway, as we talked about last time, Saudi Arabia has broken ground on the new technocratic megacity called the Line, or NEOM. And last week, hundreds of CEOs and finance moguls were expected in Saudi Arabia for a Davos-style investment conference that analysts say will highlight Saudi Arabia's geopolitical muscle despite strained ties with the United States. The Future Investment Initiative was launched in 2017 as an economic coming-out party for the world's largest crude exporter, which is trying to diversify away from oil under new Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The kingdom's de facto ruler has received visits this year from former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, French President Emmanuel Macron, and even US President Joe Biden, who had previously vowed to make Saudi Arabia a quote-unquote pariah. The meetings underline the kingdom's growing clout amid an energy crisis resulting from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. No, it's not from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I mean, goddamn, the propaganda never stops, does it? They just continue to follow the narrative, no matter what. The energy crisis is not only from the Russian invasion. This energy crisis has been building for years. Anyway, this event had over 6,000 delegates and 500 speakers. At a press conference previewing the upcoming gathering, Richard Attias stressed that it was not a conference about Saudi Arabia, but rather an international conference happening in Saudi Arabia, showing that they and the kingdom is definitely becoming a global hub. Participants included business leaders from Latin American countries that in the past years have had no representation, as well as a huge delegation from China, with more than 80 Chinese CEOs. Okay, so the spat between the United States and Saudi Arabia, you might remember it revolved around the OPEC debacle. Now the White House has said repeatedly that it amounted to basically Saudi Arabia was just aligning with Russia in the Ukraine war, a claim that Saudi officials have strenuously rejected, saying that their move was motivated by economics, not politics. And because of this year, US officials were not invited. However, that is not stopping the private sector. After all, it's stakeholder capitalism. We're going to merge corporations with government eventually, right? That's the plan. Anyway, they noted up to 400 American CEOs were expected to participate. This includes David Solomon and Jamie Dimon, the chief executive officers of Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan Chase. And yes, they shared a stage with Ray Dalio, the founder of the world's largest hedge fund, and Steven Schwarzman, the co-founder, CEO, and chairman of the Blackstone Group. A lot of the same people, same guys, same people at the World Economic Forum meetings, the same ones at Davos, the same ones intentionally destroying the world. It's the same people. It's always the same people. Anyway, that's not all. Top executives of various large banks worldwide, including Wells Fargo and other billionaires, are also attending the event. They claim, and I quote, they are laying the groundwork for deals. Saudi Arabia is one of the wealthiest nations, and they just can't let that slip by. Some of the panels at this event include discussions on topics such as a panel entitled, and I quote, Investing in Humanity, Enabling a New Global Order. Okay, interesting. From there, they have a panel on disease data, digital twins, digital magic air, which revolves around 5G tech. They're also going to have many discussions on how to be happy in the metaverse, mega threats and how to prevent them, feeding the world, which probably revolves around getting people to eat bugs and, meat replacements. However, one that really piqued my interest was a panel on sentient AI. Yes, they're going to have lots of panels on their future technocratic dystopia. It's amazing how the entire world is being manipulated into this future, and we just have no say in it at all. How great is that? Now for the last story that really caught my attention. Check this out. Ecohealth Alliance got a 6-figure weapons of mass destruction grant from the Defense Department. Okay, so you may remember Ecohealth Alliance. It's run by Peter Daszak, funded by Google, and has ties to the NIH and the CDC. Yes, they were the group pushing gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab. Well, Ecohealth Alliance got a 6-figure weapons of mass destruction grant from the Defense Department. How crazy is that? Anyway, to finish up, to quote Neil Oliver, we have 2 questions to ask. One question, why should we put up with the pain predicted in our future by the same people who made it inevitable? And question 2, how quickly do they believe that we will forget about all that has happened? I know I won't be forgetting any of it, and I'm sure you won't either. But how long can we go on like this? I don't know. Okay, so as I stated in the beginning, this is just a little overview video as I get back on my feet from the flu. As you can tell by my voice, I'm still not really 100%. Actually, I'm not 100%. I'm pretty sick still. Anyway, up next, I'm going to take a gamble. Hopefully, I won't be going too far out of my depth, but I do believe we can have a good conversation revolving around Malthusian theory. So, that's going to be the next topic. Hopefully, I'm 100% better in the next couple of days, and I can get it done by the weekend. Anyway, until then, once again, this is HelioWave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to. If you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals or Subscribestar. Make sure you disobey those true fascistas, and yes, I do hope you have a good night.